Dream a little dream of me. Welcome, kindreds, it's Jessica TheStoryWitch, and this is the next instalment in the Astrology for Witches series that I'm making for you guys here on my channel. Today's episode is all about Mercury. Mercury is a planet that is very fast moving. It takes, I think, around like 88 days to whip around the sun. It is the closest planet to the sun. And to us on Earth, you know, it's going faster than we are on Earth around the sun, which means that we do have periods of retrogrades, which when it looks like, because of the way that we are travelling and the way Mercury is travelling, it looks like Mercury is travelling backwards in the sky. This happens with other planets too, but because with Mercury it happens about 3 times a year, it's talked about a lot more, especially like in the kind of witch community and stuff. People be like, oh no, my car's broken down, are we in a Mercury retrograde, or Mercury retrograde is really kicking my ass and stuff like that. So we will talk about retrograde and what that means a little bit later on. Mercury is like the god of communication. He is also a psychopomp, so that is like a being that helps souls cross over from the end of this life to the next stage. He's very tricksy and changeable, and will sometimes say something that is true but actually turns out in a different way from what you think it would be, you know, kind of like more riddle talking than straight talking, you know. Communication is the great gift of Mercury. He's linked to the Greek god Hermes, which is often pictured, and Mercury is also pictured in the similar sort of way, with like feathers coming out of his feet. You know, he is fast, he is fleet-footed. When you think of the metal Mercury, the other word for it is quicksilver, because it is like the only liquid metal, as far as I know anyway. So like if you drop a bit of mercury on the table, you shouldn't do this because it's toxic, but if you did, like if you broke an old thermometer and there's mercury, it'll be like in a little blob, but then if you like flick it, it'll split into lots of little blobs. Like I said, don't do it at home. It's not the best thing to be doing, to be touching mercury. We know also now that mercury is toxic, even though, you know, we're still putting it in our mouths and things like that. So yes, interesting, isn't it? Toxic, fast, communication, a kind of good conductor of information, but that information sometimes is not received in the way that we think it is. You know, the message is not always completely clear and understandable to us until after. So that's an interesting kind of thing. There's also counterparts to Mercury, like the god Pan is often seen like Mercury as well, so kind of even more tricksy and a little bit more kind of animalistic as well. Some people even draw parallels with like the Green Man and things like that. So yeah, you know, think about your because the Greek myths and the Roman myths have influenced us in the Western world a lot. You know, we have those stories still kind of rammed down our throats as children. Not rammed down our throats, I suppose I actually enjoyed them, but more so than our own myths from where we live, you know. So we tend to know those stories and we know those characters, or we think we do. I've been working on a project to like reimagine what the planets would mean if they were all goddess oriented instead of god oriented, but I'm not quite there yet as far as that goes. But you know, as like I've talked about this whole series, is that we have to kind of jailbreak astrology a little bit, because it is something that has been handed down from us within the parcel of patriarchy. You know, we're looking at it through a patriarchal lens, so we need to try and kind of shatter that lens and try and look at it in a way that resonates with us and with who we are. So we know the character of Mercury, and this is what I'm trying to do with all of these planets as we're talking about them, is if you understand the character of what that planet, what it means, then when you see where it is in your chart, you will already get an understanding of what that means. So you know Mercury means communication. It is the ruling planet of Gemini, communication, you know, and travel, you know, mainly like kind of travel over short distances, and more like kind of commuting or getting out and about, you know, rather than like long distance travel, and siblings and stuff too as well. So like close relationships with your family and things like that is the Gemini, is, you know, association, but that is mercurial too. That is kind of in the sphere of Mercury. But Mercury is also the ruler of Virgo, and that might seem a little bit like, so Mercury, this kind of like very fast thinking and doing, god who like kind of runs around the place communicating. So what has that got to do with kind of like a more earthy Virgo? But Virgo is information, you know, is that it's still a very communicative sign. It is, but it kind of communicates more through the body and through information systems, categorizing things, organizing things, thinking of names of things, and kind of hierarchizing, that's probably not even a word, things, but you get where I'm going, you know. So both Virgo and Gemini are the, you know, if you've got Gemini rising or Virgo rising in your chart, then you are a child of Mercury, and you will express those mercurial qualities of usually good communication skills, sometimes slightly devious. You know, you're good with words, and so you can use that skill for good or for ill. A lot of like spin doctors and stuff have got strong Mercuries in their chart because that does give you that, you can say things in a way that are not necessarily untrue, but which can convey a meaning that is not actually also true, if you see what I mean. So look in your chart where you have Mercury. First of all, look at your rising sign. Are you ruled by Mercury? Is Mercury your ruler? If so, like I said, obviously you'll have an even stronger influence in your chart. And obviously Mercury also rules your first chart, your first house. So you will be that is like kind of your essence, your way of being in the world. We talked about this before. It's like the lens through which you look at the whole rest of your chart, you know. So you will look at your life and everything in it in a very mercurial way if you have Gemini or Virgo rising. Obviously slightly different according to which one of those signs you have rising, but still that mercurial influence. If Mercury is in an air sign in your chart, then air signs and Mercury go very well together because obviously they are about communication as well and ideas. So that is usually kind of a happy placement for Mercury in most of those places. If you've got Mercury in earth signs, sometimes that means you communicate through a different way. So you might communicate through your body, or you know, like maybe perhaps you might express through your hands, or you might dance, or you might prefer to make things to feel your emotions rather than talk about them, you know. So there's different modes of expression, isn't there? There doesn't have to be verbal expression. There can also be other ways of expressing things. So yeah, like I say, if you've got Mercury in an earth sign, you might prefer to express in a way that is more practical, more earthy, more solid. So you, like you say, you might make things, or you might dance, or you might feel your emotions in your body. So rather than feeling them, being able to verbalize them, you might feel a certain emotion as like a knot in your stomach, or, you know, that kind of thing, which we all do to a certain extent. If you have Mercury in a fire sign, then you've got that kind of air and fire, and that can be a kind of combustible place to have Mercury. It can sometimes mean that you will be very fiery with your words. Sometimes your words can be used as missiles and weapons and things as well, which again, you know, can happen with lots of other people as well. It can also mean that you use your communication skills to fire other people up, and that you will be inspirational. If you have Mercury in a water sign, then that tends to be more like things bubbling up from the deep. You know, when you think of air and water together, sometimes you can get steam if you've got some fire, some heat going on there as well, but it's more like the communication is kind of coming from deep within. And so normally you have to listen very deep into your intuition to receive that communication, rather than wanting to grab the to communicate outwardly so much. So, but you might be a little bit more introverted if you have Mercury in a water sign. If Mercury is in one of the angular houses, like we've talked about before, so if it's in the first house, the fourth house, the seventh house, the 10th house, then it will be more prominent in your chart, and so that will also make you a little bit more mercurial as well. So look at the sign that Mercury is in, look at the house that Mercury is in, because the house governs the sphere of your life where Mercury is. Like if you've got Mercury in your 9th house, for example, then that is the house that governs like long distance travel and learning, really, you know, like you're kind of like the topics that you're interested in learning, like kind of philosophy and what your kind of life path of learning is all about. So if you have Mercury there, then communication is going to be very important to that. So you might find that you travel to hear lectures about things, or you might kind of go on pilgrimages to places that you feel like you can learn from, that kind of thing. Whereas if you've got Mercury, say, in your second house, then that would be a much more different prospect. That would be more like, the second house is about kind of possessions and security and being safe in the world. And so you might find that having Mercury there will make you more inclined to be careful what you say, or perhaps even slightly manipulative sometimes, because you are, the first and foremost drive is to kind of protect and be safe in terms of money and security, that kind of thing. So yeah, look where you have got Mercury in your chart, and also look, was Mercury retrograde when you were born, or was it direct? So Mercury, like I said at the start of this video, goes retrograde about 3 times a year, and you know, it lasts for a few weeks each time, and people panic more and more. So I don't know if it's just because I'm using social media and stuff now, but it seems to be that people, like, even people who don't normally talk about this kind of stuff are like, oh, Mercury's retrograde, you know. So if you were born when Mercury was direct, then that's just like regular Mercury. Whereas if you, in Mercury retrograde, when Mercury is retrograde, people kind of panic because things tend to break down, communications break down, machines break down, information systems break down, you know, like Facebook goes down. It's those kind of, the systems of communication, the systems of organisation also, because, you know, think about that Virgo and link with Mercury too. Classifications even, you know, can break down, and that is obviously a pain in the ass. If like your car breaks down, that's not good, but we also need these periods of these things breaking down regularly to restructure things in the way that are in a better way. So like, you know, we've got these like kind of set structures of society, and when we come to a Mercury retrograde, it gives us chance to kind of take these things apart and relook at whether they are, you know, they are working for us. And that's kind of like on a grand scale, but also like on a more personal scale. If you, in the Mercury retrograde periods, instead of trying to kind of force new communications or like trying to travel to places and things like that, is if you can, you know, as best you can in living a normal life, if you try and use that time to kind of go over old ground and try to unpick any knots that have been caused, you know, things, hurts you may have caused, problems to do, especially to do with communication with others, if you can kind of go over that and try and resolve those things, then it'll make things a lot easier going forward. So if you look at a retrograde period as a period to redo, you know, a do-over, basically, it's like a little reset, a little do-over, then it's not as scary as if we look at it as like everything's going to be completely fucked. And if in your chart Mercury was retrograde when you were born, then you are naturally going to feel more at home during those retrograde periods. In fact, you might feel more at home during those retrograde periods than you do when Mercury is direct. That doesn't mean you're going to feel like the rest of the time, but like you don't fear the breakdown, you don't fear the change the same as most of us do. So have a look in your chart. If on the chart, if you've gone to astro.com, and I think most of the other places that you can get charts done do this the same, it'll just have a little R next to it to show, or sometimes a little cross next to it to show that the planet was retrograde when you were born. So you can check to see if your Mercury is retrograde. So that is your homework. See where in your chart Mercury is which house is it in, which sign is it in. Is it your ruling planet? So it would be your ruling planet if you have Gemini rising or Virgo rising. And is it retrograde or is it direct? And you can let me know in the comments, because I'm nosy like that and I like to know. It's really fun for me to kind of match people up with their charts and be like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, or oh, I didn't really see that coming. I will see you in the next video, which is going to be Mars and Venus. Thank you so much for watching. Warmest blessings, and I will see you very soon.